Okay, class, welcome to the homework review. We are reviewing the homework for page 435, number 1 through 8. That's the third page of your homework. Covering mostly the distance formula. So here we have some simple problems. Remember, there's two methods to solve using the distance formula. Well, it's truly one method. It's the Pythagorean theorem, and then out of the Pythagorean theorem, we built the distance formula. So let's look at the Pythagorean theorem. Method 1, Pythagorean theorem. That's a squared plus b squared equals c squared. It's really good for integers. So you have your first point, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 4 comma 5. And you have a point 2, 2. So instead of doing the distance formula, you have integer answers. You can simply go ahead and build your right triangle. That creates a 90-degree angle right here. And now you have, it's only 2 units here for A, and it's 3 units for B, and then you're looking for C. If you want to put the vertices, you could put capital A, capital B, capital C. But it's pretty simple now. You're just substituting for A and B. We have the Pythagorean theorem written down over here, so we're going to put in for A, 2, 2 squared, 3 squared equals c squared. And here we got 4 plus 9 equals c squared. That's 13 equals c squared. If you didn't have a calculator and you took the square root for c, you could guesstimate it between 3 and 4. It's probably about 3.6. Let's see. Square root of 13 is, light's really bad, 3.6. It's really hard to see. Check it for reasonable. It's reasonable. We'll do the same thing for number 2. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. I always label my points. 1, 3. Connect the dots. Build your right triangle. Since we always call the shortest leg A, we'll call that capital A, little a. That would have to be capital B, little b. Remember, this is your right angle. And you're looking for C now. So A is equal to 1. 1, 2, 3, 4. B is equal to 4. And then we'll do 1 squared plus 4 squared equals c squared. 1 plus 16 equals c squared. 17 equals c squared. And now we just need to take square root. It's just, the square root of 16 is 4, so this is slightly bigger. It's probably 4.1. Radical 17. Again, I'm sorry about the light. Square root of 17, there it is. 4.12, so 4.1. But now we have decimals once we get to C, on number 3, I mean. Now we have decimals, so we're going to need to apply the distance formula. You can always go back to your notes. You can turn back onto the opposite page. If I travel to problem example 3, I have the distance formula here. It's all over your book in this section. Remember, we're replacing D with C with D, like we discussed, distance formula. So you do need to write it down. D equals So this is method 2. Put square root, begin parentheses. I'm looking back at page 434, and I see it's x. You subtract the x's. y2 minus y1. Subtract the y's. So we need to label these points. The first pair we would call x1, y1. That means it's my first pair of x and y. The sub numbers are not exponents. This is my second pair. And now I'm just plugging in. I do need to plot these, and I'll do that at the end to check for reasonableness. Here's the square root. I need to find x2. I do it here. Negative 3.5. The minus sign. And then I travel to x1. 2.5. Oops, I forgot some squares here. Squared. y2 is negative 5 minus, oh, remember I said if you end up with two negatives, I'm going to use a second parentheses. Negative 1. Close this parentheses and squared. Now I do under PEMDAS, I have to do parentheses first. So I'm going to do radical. Negative 3.5 minus 2.5. You can use your calculator if you don't know how to add and subtract negative numbers. But this is negative 6.0 or negative 6. Negative 5 plus 1 is negative 4. So there's a lot of places to go wrong there. Now I have my square root. This is 36, positive, because negative 6 times negative 6. Two negatives make a positive. Negative 4 times negative 4 is positive 16. D equals the square root of 52. And now I need to use a calculator for that. It's slightly bigger than radical 49, which would be 7. It's got to be 7 point something. Try to get it in the right light. Square root of 52, I get 7.2. All right, and now I still need to check for reasonableness. 2.5, that's 2.5, down 1. And negative 3.5. 1, 2, 3.5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I have these points connecting. And the distance here was 7.2. Is it reasonable if I make a right triangle here? Let's just it's got to come down in the half spot. Making a right angle there. If we count that, it's a 1. Wait, that's 1, 2. That's negative 3. Okay, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then from here, these are whole numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4. So 6, 4, 7.2. That's very reasonable that the hypotenuse is slightly longer than this. Now we have a problem where they're just going to give you the coordinates, and there's not a lot of space given here, so we might need to use some extra paper here. So let me just pop this in. You could always do your work on a separate piece of paper. And the problem reads, a ferry set sail from an island located at 412 on a map. I like to visualize things, so I'll just put some X's and Y's in here. 412, 1, 2, 3, oh, that's going to go off. So I could go by twos. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. 2, 4, negative 6. Negative 6. So now I could fit it on. 4, 12. 2, 4, 12. And then 6, 2, 2, 4, 6, and 2. These are integer numbers, so I don't need to use the distance formula. I can, instead, I could just build my right triangle. It's going to be a little tricky because I went by units of 2. So that tells me to get from 2 to 12, on the going up is the y coordinates, that's the change in y. It goes from 2 to 12, that's 10. And then it goes from 4 to 6, that's only 2. So now I go a squared plus b squared equals c squared. I'll call this capital A, little a, capital B, little b, and then that's c. So a is 2, 2 squared, b is 10. That equals c squared. 4 plus 100 equals c squared. This is going to be really close to 10. 104 equals c squared, and I take the square root and I get c equals radical 104, 10.2. I know the units on here, maybe I don't. Nope. But yes, mile. Now I changed this this thing here, and then the question asks, how far will the ferry travel if each unit on the grid is 0.5 miles? So I did this problem a little bit wrong. I set up the grid with units of 2, and you're supposed to set it up with halves. If you had to round that to the nearest half mile, you'd have to round down to 10. This will all be on a video, so you can pause it at that point. Use the distance formula to find the distance between each pair of points. So now we are using the distance formula. So for each one, call them x1, y1, x2, y2, x1, y1, x2, y2, x1, y1, x2, y2. So again, they're pairs of what? First pair, second pair, first pair, second pair, first pair, second pair. So it goes progressively from easy to hard, where it's not that easy because you have a lot of, these are both in the fourth quadrant, so, or third quadrant, so they're both negative. You're going to have a lot of negatives. You only have to write the distance formula down once. D equals square root x2 minus x1 squared, y2 minus y1 squared. I'm going to help you set them all up. Again, you're just plugging in. x2, negative 4 minus negative 5 squared, negative 2 minus negative 3 squared, there's a lot of things you have to do inside the parentheses before you ever get to square these numbers. I'm going to, because I have lack of space here, I have to do this math here. Negative 4 plus 5 is 1. Negative 2 plus 3 is also 1. So you end up with D equals 1 plus 1 square root, 1 squared and 1 squared. Square root of 2, which is 1.4. So you can see how complicated distance formula can get. And now we'll just do the other ones. D equals square root, D equals square root. I'm not going to rewrite the formula. I'm going to just go ahead and go to the next step. Plugging in 2.5 minus, oops, I made a mistake. That's wrong. This is negative 4, because that's x2 is negative 4 minus 3.5. squared plus, now I have 2.5 minus 1. It's easy to make a mistake, so try to track it with your finger. Here we end up with negative 7.5 squared. I'm going to continue using the parentheses because it's negative. And this is 1.5 squared. I like to, when I have a decimal or a fraction, I like to keep the parentheses also. I'm going to have to use my calculator now. It's negative 7.5 squared. So you type it in like, if you were using your calculator, you need to go ahead and use your parentheses and use the negative sign. 7.5. Close that parentheses like that, then hit the squared button. Positive 56.25. Again, the negative has to be inside the parentheses so that when you square it, the calculator does negative 7.5 times negative 7.5. 56.25. 56.25. 1.5 squared is 2.25. Ends up being 58.5. So D equals square root 58.5, 7.7. You actually end up with 7.648. That's a tough one for rounding because you would tend to look at this 4 here, but you want it to the nearest tenth. So, all right, we have the last one. Now we have fractions. You would really want to carefully look at this before you start, and you're going to need to change this to 8 2/4 before you begin, because if you look at that over here, you need common denominator. Now the problem is 3/4. You're going to be borrowing here. It's a tough little subtraction. Parentheses, x2 is negative 6 3/4 minus 8 2/4 squared plus 7.5 minus 12 squared. This is tough. So what you end up with here is, luckily they're both subtracted, so you could treat it like addition here. You're going to end up with negative 14 5/4. But that's too many, 5/4. You could take a whole another whole out of that. So you're going to get, instead of negative 4, you're going to get negative 15 1/4 squared. You could change that to negative 15.25. This is another tough subtraction here. You're going to end up with 4.5, negative 4.5. Again, I'll change these to decimals when I'm squaring. Negative 15.25 squared plus negative 4.5 squared. Now I can do all this. Your answer is going to come out positive. So to save time, you can actually use positive 15.25 if you want. All right, and that's the end of class. So I will wrap this up, and I'll send it out to you. You guys can go ahead and leave. Thanks for your day. You end up with square root of 232.56, or you square that, and 4.5 squared is 20.25. Add those together. And you're going to be taking the square root of around 252.8. And you get 15.9, approximately. Okay. And we'll stop it there.